This week on Around the Coin, Mike Townsend, Brian Roemmele, and Faisal Khan discuss the huge effects of Governor Jerry Brown signing a law that legalizes Bitcoin in California, as well as the implications of a Bitcoin exchange.
All right. Good morning, Brian, Faisal. Here we are on Sunday, June 29th for another exciting episode of Around the Coin. How are you guys doing this morning?
Good morning.
Wonderful.
Doing good.
Morning. Yeah.
Good morning. So some exciting news this week as Andreessen Horowitz tries to take on the world, or Mark Andreessen rather, particularly, by Brian. And I know you were particularly excited about this one as he's moving mountains.
Yes.
What do you guys think about the week's news?
Well, what a news week for Bitcoin. I mean, let's go.
So long story is it increases value for it, right? Whether on the books or not.
Yeah, the most recent bit of information. It's Sunday, and last night on a Saturday, our governor of the state of California, Jerry Brown, signed in a law that made Bitcoin a legal currency. Very well distinguished between legal tender. And it's important to understand the difference, but it is a dramatic turn of events. Now, what is surprising to a lot of people, and I really didn't talk about this very much over the last few months, is all alternative currencies were illegal in the state of California. And really what Jerry Brown signed into law was a removal of certain aspects of the antiquated law.
So was this
Bill AB 129?
Was this a shotgun approach was it a shotgun approach initially to make all cryptocurrencies illegal, and then they started removing those layers of legalities?
No,
at a certain
actually,
point?
the law dates back from legacy many decades ago. I don't know exactly. I think it's 1930s, and obviously was not enforced. But what happened was bankers, and strangely enough, two banks in the Silicon Valley prompted the state to review the law. And that's why the financial committee got behind it. And the bill was passed unanimously by the financial sector of financial group within the state legislature. So essentially what has happened is by making Bitcoin legal currency in the state of California, it will very likely make it impossible for it to be illegal in the rest of the country. The Federal Interstate Commerce Act of 1887, essentially designed only for railroads. And a lot of lawyers even look at this and say, Brian, what are you talking about? Well, if you really study, and there are some experts about this who study that particular act, it's been used to uniformly control things that are legal in one state and illegal in others, so the state can't effectively block it. Now, mostly having to do with conveyances, like currencies, like gift cards. It was used in a number of very famous gift card cases, and now on alternative currencies. And of course, before it was on containers and railroad shipping across state lines. So what it essentially means is if Louisiana decides that they're going to jail people who use Bitcoin, they couldn't do it. They could not create a law like that because it's very likely that Bitcoin will cross the state lines for a number of different reasons, if not electronically, certainly travelers carrying Bitcoin.
Do you think the reality Brian, do you think the reality is that they effectively started the pendulum swing going in that direction? I mean, if you look at other similar, if you look at, marijuana cases, right? That's, you can certainly see the pendulum though. Effectively, once you get major states to make decisions. Swing. So what does it look like in the next couple of years?
Yeah, marijuana law is a little different because federal government has it as a controlled substance, and it has other aspects, the liquor laws and state lines, other things. This is really related to actual commerce, and this is a payment vehicle. And it's back in it actually predates the 1800s, and this is when there was a free banking period in the United States. Every bank had its own currency. Every business, major business had its own currency. I'm a collector of old railroad currencies that they used to pay their workers in. And I have thousands of old banknotes that were issued by banks. So, if you're old enough, back when I was a kid in the 1800s, we used to trade money that had the names of the business on it, and that was considered legal currency. And then somewhere around the creation of the Federal Reserve and that period, many states moved to make it illegal to have any other currency but legal tender.
So who does this affect the most?
Everybody.
So if you're an independent trader, say you use Coinbase, or even if you just use Bitcoin casually, it doesn't seem to affect you, right? There's nothing you could do now you couldn't do before.
Well, you're now doing it fully recognizable under the California law, if you're in the state of California, as being a legal activity. Prior to that, there was ostensibly the possibility that the revenuers could show up at your house and saying you're doing an illegal activity.
Right.
This expands far beyond that. The law itself actually mentioned Starbucks stars, and it's funny. One of my contacts within state of California, who does a lot of work in researching alternative currencies and merchant accounts payment systems, said that Starbucks indirectly was prompting California to get this done. Within minutes, Mark Andreessen sent a tweet thanking Jerry Brown for doing this. Now, interesting news is in the state of New York. New York wanted to be the first state to make Bitcoin, quote unquote, legal. And its state Department of Financial Services actually held a number of meetings. And a lot of the anti-Bitcoin types assume that this is it. They're shutting it down. In reality, they were blown away by the fact that they were having very level-headed conversations about wanting to not only review ways to make this work, particular Benjamin Losky, who is the head of the DFS, Department of Financial Services, State of New York. But they're a little laggard. But New York wants to lead in alternative currencies. I believe all of my Wall Street analyst contacts, every single one of them, not only are excited about Bitcoin, they are ready and willing to go.
Brian,
they care not about the currency.
When we talk about who it affects, do you believe that it does? Because I can't believe it affects the independent users of Bitcoin in a real, practical way. Well, sure, technically it does, but I think what I'm proposing, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on, does it sort of open the floodgates into other opportunities? Do people start doing things now because they were a little bit nervous about doing them before and they just didn't happen? Do you see that as the bigger effect?
Who you are, right? It's according to who you are. I'm assuming a vast majority of the listeners of our show are entrepreneurially inclined. What this means is right in front of you. If you haven't seen it for the last 2 years, this is the neon sign with the arrows pointing, with Mark Andreessen with a big smile on his face leading you into the tent. This is the opportunity of a lifetime. These protocols, not Bitcoin necessarily itself in and of itself, but these protocols are uniformly going to change the way we interact with all financial services at some point in the future. With the New York, the rumor right now is the NASDAQ is really ready and willing and able to become a legal Bitcoin exchange. The only thing that's stopping them is not federal government, it's state of New York. It's currently not legal for them to handle Bitcoin. So
why is New York so particularly important? Just because the exchange is there?
They're a financial center, and they want to hold on.
They're the financial center to the world. And all the major banks, all the foreign banks are headquartered out of New York.
So when New York does what California just did, does that essentially open up the floodgates to say?
I think that's a very mild way of putting it. When New York does what it does, it'll affect every financial capital in the world.
Instantly, here's what's going on. New York Post, in its famous article, and we'll link it in the show, is essentially pitting Mark Andreessen and his request, which was leaked not by him, but by probably very likely somebody who's opposing him on the other side. It's going to be the old versus the new. And it's funny, NASDAQ being put as old because they were disruptors of the New York Stock Exchange. So NASDAQ wants to hold on to a position. And hedge funds, insurance funds, institutional investors want to get into Bitcoin in a major way legally. A lot of these funds can't directly hold Bitcoin because of the way it is the way these funds are put together. There's a number of funds that are trying to go out there to make it easier. But with NASDAQ doing this, we're looking at immediately a massive amount of supply and demand inequities are going to take place. There's just not enough Bitcoin generated by us miners that would satisfy the demand of even 0.25% of hedge funds. And there's no doubt that once it's listed, hedge funds are going to buy into it. It's what they do. And institutional investors are going to buy into it. So,
well, there's always going to be enough, right? Because essentially just drives price up, right?
It will, but we are still talking about Bitcoins and, sub Bitcoins and decimals. We haven't gone down to the Satoshis yet. Yeah. And unless we don't go there, the supply is somewhat limited.
Yeah, and it gets to this point. Now, we run out of Bitcoin? That's not really the issue. What's going to happen is it is going to, of course, another speculative bubble. That's what this is going to drive this next phase, is going to raise Bitcoin. I have a group of researchers we work with called the rocket scientists, and these are university professors, mathematics and physicists, primarily all of them. And we tackle problems on predicting primarily payment system related things, but we go into other things. And had a group meeting, haven't had a meeting in quite a long time, about what would happen if NASDAQ were to make Bitcoin an exchangeable financial class. They said, start adding zeros onto the value of Bitcoin, 4, 5, or 6.
Wow.
And it's not because of the intrinsic value. It's because of the immediate supply-demand scenario. Will it make it more volatile? Very short term. Actually expanding it and putting it on a market like NASDAQ, or what Mark Andreessen is apparently predicting, a lot of people are predicting he's going to do, which is to try to go against the NASDAQ move. We're going to see a radical evaporation of available Bitcoin.
So let's dive in. Like, what exactly is he proposing? And then what do you think, if he has any ulterior motives or long-term goals or visions behind it?
I can only speak to what I know that's written in the New York Post article. I cannot speak to anything I might know privately. And what the New York Post is saying...
Brian, no one else is listening.
Yeah, no, it's just us. And Faisal apparently dropped off. But here's what I do know from that article, is that somebody leaked out the information that Mark has been aggressively trying to persuade the New York DFS to move on the legislation as soon as possible so that he can open an exchange in the city of New York, primarily to do alternative algorithmic and Bitcoin-based currencies. And the problem is they want to construct this law in such a way where current stakeholders and new entrepreneurs are essentially given equal play. There is going to be some little bias towards legacy players like NASDAQ, but it will be the fireworks of a generation, in my view, because you're going to have really nimble-footed, scrappy underdog startup type of environment with NASDAQ. And all this means for everybody in the Bitcoin or the whole alternative currency ecosystem is that an order of magnitude or many orders of magnitude of interest is going to take place. And that will drive up the usability of Bitcoin, because as more and more people hear about the news is going to be, probably pretty predictable as we enter into the fall. We'll see the evening news. Bitcoin has reached, $12,000 per coin, and once that type of news is in the public mindset, merchants will start clamoring for acceptance, just because it's in the public view. And whether or not it solves a problem, there's a lot of things that might take off way before it solves a problem. So
what literally will change here? And Faisal, maybe you could chime in here. What are some ideas, or how does the world, I guess, look a little bit different? Now with Bitcoin becoming legal or on the exchange, what effect does this effectively have Faisal, you're still there, right?
Yeah. Well, think about it as this way. Legalizing or the ability to take stored valued information and being able to trade with it. I don't know about you, but the implications are just absolutely mind-boggling. And not only is it an information with intrinsic value built in that you can trade, it's also the payment rails of a very new payment rails, which is designed for the 21st century, so to speak. Works on TCP/IP. Anyone can use it as seamlessly as using email or just sending a packet across the world, and available to all. There's no discrimination whatsoever. You can imagine the thousands of use cases that will eventually come.
Yeah, effectively, Faisal. Really, I'm asking you, what if the internet came up tomorrow, and I'm saying, what could this internet be used for? I mean, this almost to me seems like the second coming after the internet, right? It is.
It might be the first coming. I call it the communication revolution and the compensation revolution. I think these two things are tied together, but maybe more powerful ultimately. The movement.
I'll tell you, the examples we have currently are only the examples we have currently. Meaning,
I love it. Yeah,
it's we really don't know. No one in 92, 93, 94 could tell what would happen in 2014. There'd be something called Twitter. There'd be something like Facebook or YouTube or Uber, an app
or
using on the phone. I mean, or Yo for that matter, right? Yo.
Yeah.
And so we really do not know the use cases that will come on. We are trying to juxtapose the existing payment technologies, the existing, payment models, businesses that we have, and saying, well, these can be transported onto the Bitcoin protocol.
Faisal, I'm curious, what's the other way around? So if we're in 1994 and we're imagining all the use cases for the internet, one thing we can probably conclude are the devices or the experiences that we have now are going to be, they're going to dissolve, right? So if you're using telephones, or I guess, there's not too much that dissolved. The internet kind of emerged. Now we have an existing system, an existing exchange. Do you think that is largely going to dissolve or transition? Dollars are going to be now traded?
Well, must we just restrict it to money? I mean, the protocol itself does many things more. ID verification, voting, stocks, being a registrar, being a depository. These are the use cases that we have yet to come in. Imagine right now, if you were to, I'll give you an example. You want to buy 10 ounces of gold, 1 troy ounce from London, which is about 32 ounces, I believe. So you buy 1 troy ounce of gold, which is, $1,700. I'm not even sure the price of gold. But with the Bitcoin protocol, someone could actually own 1/100th of an ounce, the small micro fractions of something that you cannot physically own right now, but you could own it with Bitcoin protocol. The general ledger will allow you to do that. There's so many cases, like I said, that can happen, but we really don't know. We are just juxtaposing, like I said, the existing payment technologies, rails, businesses, etc., onto that we will do this with protocol. With Bitcoin, we will do remittances, we will do traditional retail, etc., etc. But the protocol itself is just much more advanced. It has the ability to do voting, be a ledger, be an open public ledger, allow you to be a repository, allow you to do many, many things. An example, and this is just an example, if one were to own 1 troy ounce of gold, whatever it's worth, you have to only own 1 troy ounce. You can't own 1/100th of a fraction or, 60/30th of a fraction, what have you, 30/60th of a fraction, rather. So things like the Bitcoin protocol, it can allow you to do this. It can allow you to own small, minute transactions. Because it was built that way. The protocol itself was built that way.
So hold on with that. Hold on with that notion of fractional ownership. I think that's brilliant. Expand upon that. Do you see that possibly ownership in all sorts of, asset classes, real estate, stocks, everything? I mean, there's no limit, right?
Well, here's the thing. Right now, we are pairing Bitcoin with what? With fiat currency.
Sure.
So you'll be able to pair it. You'll be able to pair it with commodities. So once you start pairing Bitcoin to a commodity, 1 Bitcoin is equal to so many ounces of silver. then you'll be able, if you can trade Bitcoin in sub fractions, decimal fractions, you'll be able to do the same thing with that silver.
Wow.
So when you start pairing, this is why the exchange would come in very handy. Right now, you and I could not possibly go and buy one share of Google or Apple, $600 or $500. Imagine fractional ownership in an exchange for a share of Apple.
Well, that would make Berkshire Hathaway a much cheaper stock to buy.
Well, no, the stock will still remain the same.
No, I'm joking. It's
but the thing is,
72,000.
Yeah, but the thing is, hey, what do you got in your wallet? $60. Okay, let me buy you $60 worth of Apple right now. That's fractional ownership. Fractional ownership in equities. And the protocol will allow you to do that. Why? Because the current system does not allow you to do that. It doesn't go more than 2 decimal places.
Interesting. There's
you understand what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, there's a new peer-to-peer lending system called BTC Jam, and it's actually catching fire all over the place. I've probably have done about 25 loans at this point. Only one failed to produce, and I think they're going to produce. So
explain, Brian, explain it a little bit more.
It is like Prosper, but with Bitcoin, and it's btcjam.com. It is really catching fire. A lot of the early, loan requests are usually Bitcoin related. Somebody's creating some kind of Bitcoin related business or whatever, but it's a peer-to-peer lending environment. Interest rates have been insane in some cases. I had one that had a $1,200 annual interest rate. Now that was a short loan. That was, I think, 72 hours. And so you put Bitcoin in, you loan Bitcoin, and more Bitcoin hopefully comes back your way. The vetting process is not what I would consider extremely sophisticated, but it's quite interesting. At least the early adopters are doing everything they can to make.
So this is not effectively taking the place of an escrow, right? This is literally a loaning.
This is a loaning.
I'll give you another example.
Go ahead.
Same scenario that you're talking about. Think about Kickstarter. Being able to do a Kickstarter using the Bitcoin protocol, without the high fees. Someone could do it, low fees, fractional ownership. I mean, you could even do it on a per profit basis. Everything is in the ledger. Everything is clean. The use cases, like I said, we have no idea right now. I'm sure the big guys, they already know it. But right now it's going to be about supply and demand, eat up the supply, create a demand, and see how it goes.
And that's why when we get the public markets and what Mark Andreessen is working on, competing with the NASDAQ type of market and others. There's, I can tell you, off the record, there's probably about a dozen people I know of Mark Andreessen's.
Oh yeah, there's got to be.
I've had conversations that are definitely looking at this in a very aggressive way. So will Bitcoin be around a long time? Yes. Once it's cemented within a NASDAQ type market, you're not going to see the federal government or, there was a very famous, and you guys kind of went after me because I posted his information, a very famous investor that basically said Bitcoin would be outlawed. And that was last year.
If you posted it live, who was it?
Well, it was Keith Ribot. He was a former executive at Square. And I love Keith. He's a great guy, but I think he was really, I don't know where he was coming from, but
wrong.
He was incorrect.
He was really wrong.
So basically, and he's not alone. I don't mean to beat him up. There was probably
a lot of
naysayers.
There are many.
I call them the Bitcoin.
I agree with you.
The Bitcoin tulip craze mania people, or the Bitcoin is a pyramid, or the FBI will outlaw Bitcoin crowd. And I understand where their mindset is coming from. And it's hard because you're in this cutting edge world of technology and you're trying to stay on top of it. But, as you get older and as you start looking at the things that already came, like Faisal brilliantly presented, you can't possibly predict. Once the protocol is sound and the basis of that. I mean, once I saw that, I saw 2011, I think, I said, this is a future. But I knew politically you couldn't stand on a mountain and start saying Bitcoin's going to take over.
Here's another idea for you, Faisal. Effectively, I think the Bitcoin, freedom in a way will replace essentially 30% of the U.S. GDP, which is in the stock market, right? Everything that is involved, all of Wall Street, essentially the inefficiency there can be done through an API, almost every single part of it. But effectively, I think an interesting, and I heard this example from Chamath, a very famous and amazing investor, is that you get to a point where if you look at a company and you look at internal funding that goes on, imagine Spotify tomorrow said to all their users, hey, look, we're raising $50 million to expand and build these amazing products that you want as listeners. You know, to contribute to us, you can actually own a piece of Spotify. You can own, you know, one fraction of a equity point if you'd like to not donate, but buy, through Bitcoin. Say they had Bitcoin, you could buy any amount you want. Now there's no effective limit to the micro ownership of companies, right? If any company out there wanted to raise, you now can just go to your existing customers and as a whole new supply pool for immediate cash in exchange for stock in the company, just turn on a faucet. And he gave that example.
You make a lot of people nervous, Mike.
Yeah, absolutely.
And a lot of gatekeepers very nervous
it's obviously in the very early days, and we're not going to see this in the short term, maybe, but it just opens
It's not legal under...
Yeah, today
under current security laws.
Under current security, but look at even like, you know, AngelList, right? You know, SEC is effectively opening up the ability to speak about private deals, right? And the whole syndicates that are going on now. I mean, that effectively revolutionized the VC world.
It's already kind of happening. Like companies like I mentioned, like BTC Jam. I mean, you're essentially taking ownership temporarily in somebody's future. I mean, this is the whole thing about what microloans and Prosper and even Kiva to some extent is about. And it's not just about the United States. It's about the world. I mean, if you're able, and I posed this question a couple of times on Quora, what would it be like if I can send a reasonably small amount to somebody extremely poor, but maybe entrepreneurially inclined in another part of the world? There's extremely creative people in middle of Africa or Gobi Desert. And what if I can send them $5 to help start their business? What if you can? What if other people can? Reasonably small amounts of money can change the world dramatically.
I'll give you one very important aspect to understand is imagine this: if the U.S. did not allow equity markets, you know, what would happen? I mean, assume there were no equity markets. The same case is happening with Bitcoin. Because of the inclusion and the legality and, you know, approval of making Bitcoin legal, you now have American businesses that can invest in Bitcoin rather than taking it overseas. You see a lot of exchanges that are overseas, and there's a reason for that. It's because they're not allowed to be they're not allowed to operate in the U.S. If you make something legal, as if they have done with Bitcoin, and hopefully, you know, the DFS in New York will also do so, you'll see a lot of investments coming into the Bitcoin ecosystem. You'll see a lot of overseas business or people who are thinking about establishing themselves overseas will bring their business back to the U.S. soil because it's easy to get funded and so forth. They need that legal coverage. They need the legal umbrella before they can pump money into it.
And Faisal, I know we talked about that before the show about a couple different ideas. One I found really fascinating that I'd love to hear your perspective on, especially living over in Pakistan, is what does it mean effectively if these changes start to occur for the developing world? You know, what does the ripple effect look like for outside the U.S.? Or do other countries follow in similar legal patterns? Or, you know, do you see a larger pendulum taking place? How does this affect the rest of the world, you know, outside the U.S. walls?
Well, I think for financial inclusion right now, you know, being able to send small amounts overseas is just not possible. It is just not economically viable to send someone $10. So if you have a father who's working in the U.S. and he wants to send his daughter $20, he just can't do it. With Bitcoin, you can. Assuming, you know, that the daughter is able to instantly sort of transform the Bitcoin back into fiat. But right now, if sub $100 transactions are just so inherently expensive or not economically viable, they just cannot happen. In fact, so much so that the World Bank remittance data that they collect is for $200. The minimum inclusion, the minimum money transfer that MTOs will do is $300. So essentially what they're trying to tell you, anything under $300 is not viable for us, the MTO operator, and is simply not going to be viable for the person getting it. So being able to send small amounts of cash, you know, you have a wife that's overseas overseas, wants to order food, wants about $30. You remit her $30 through Bitcoin. It's instant. It's immediate, and very, very low fees. You simply could not do that prior to Bitcoin. So I think the implications
Faisal,
are going to be huge.
I find this interesting. The CEO of, I don't know if you saw this, of Western Union was on Bloomberg's Street Smart program and was interviewed about Bitcoin. And he said as soon as Bitcoin was regulated, and not even legal, regulated, that they would trade it like the 121 currencies they currently trade. Now, watching the interview, you come away with the idea that the whole concept of Bitcoin, especially for remittances, probably cause some sleepless nights for executives at Western Union because they've built an entire infrastructure on this particular element of Bitcoin, and that's just one small element. How do you see Bitcoin, just let's just say if it's mildly successful on the trading platforms of NASDAQ and Andreessen, how do you see that changing a company like Western Union?
It's very hard to say because Western Union itself is riding on so many payment rails all across the world. The question to ask would be, in my opinion, would Western Union adopt Bitcoin as its native protocol? If I had a choice between Bitcoin and something else, I'd probably adopt Ripple as a native protocol because it allows me to have multiple fiat currencies in it. With Bitcoin, there's almost the element of the currency pair and changing it. So I think the first thing the Western Union would look at is maybe they'll bring it as an alternate currency and trade on it and see what they get. Won't be much, but they would eventually have to somehow see how they can implement the actual in the actual engine and the payment rails of Bitcoin. And if they are able to do that with the Bitcoin protocol, how do they transport currencies that are USD or, French, Euro or the British pound? I see a huge issue with that in the existing protocol because of the currency pair issues. You'll have to do double currency transactions to get into your currency pair.
We were talking
with Ripple, may not be a problem.
We were talking about how access to banking on a lot of shows has been limited to different parts of the world. If I don't know if you guys been tracking what a traditional passbook savings account does in the United States, but Mike, if you what do you think it is right now? What do you think the interest rate is for a passbook savings account?
Oh boy,
it's less than 1%.
Yeah. All
right. So imagine an alternative coin that pays 64% interest on whatever you have in your wallet.
Immediately skeptical.
Well, yeah, of course. So there's a coin out there called SaveCoin, and it's got a lot of interest. I've been mining it for quite a while, primarily because of the interest rate payment. What they did is they pre-mined the coin to almost 20, I think it's 20 million coins and 1 million are to be mined. And that 20 million is being used as interest payments for people who hold the coin. So anybody who has a coin, it automatically grows by annualized 64% interest or 0.137 daily. I've had the coin's about 3 months old, and I've had just about 3 months worth of interest payments.
So what's the concept here? Because there's no way they can just give away money, right? Effectively.
Well, they pre-mine the coin, and I'm usually pre-mining. And what that basically means is the coins are already been, the algorithm has already been solved. The coin's already in a wallet. And there's a number of ways you can do that. And it's a sort of an act of fiat, if you will.
So did the creator initially do this?
Yes, the creator of the coin independently came up with the idea, and the name of the coin says what he's trying to do. It's a coin primarily for savings. So now, interesting, there's two variables on this type of coin that's outside what we're used to with Bitcoin. One variable is, of course, the legal tender conversions versus the value of SaveCoin. And that's going to be it's fluctuating between 6 and 2 cents. It's quite wide. But there's also, over time, the value of each coin is going to grow. And if you look at the 64% yearly compounded interest, this is, let's just say it's mildly successful. This is a incredible turn of events. Whether it is SaveCoin itself, not certain. But the premise of a coin that pays interest to the owner, let alone the inflationary rise that it has over time, most reasonable alternative currencies ultimately rise over time. They are, short-term, very highly volatile, is an amazing premise. Where do you stick your money? The asset classes that one must stick their money in to get any return on investment is usually highly risky and very exclusionary to people of little means. The average person is not going to do exceedingly well in the stock market. In fact, if you have a 401k over the last 10 years, you did miserably, even with the rapid rise of the stock market over the last few years.
So where are people keeping it? If you have, say, $10,000 right now worth of Bitcoin, where are people keeping it? Right in their wallets, right in their Coinbase accounts for the vast majority of people?
Either a Coinbase account, if you're really security conscious, something called a paper wallet. And that's essentially where you're printing off both key pairs and putting it hopefully in an indestructible manner. One very popular one particular startup that approached me has a laser etching system where they etch the Bitcoin addresses onto a piece of metal, which is pretty indestructible. And that's to my view, that's about as safe as you can get right now for storing Bitcoin long term.
So Faisal,
will it pay off?
Yeah, go ahead, Brian.
I think so, long term. I was just going to say, will it pay off as an investment class? Well, all the things we're talking about, not to hype or speculate, but I mean, all the things we're talking about on the use cases of Bitcoin and alternative, crypto, algorithmic currencies, et cetera, they're all going to rise to some degree. The top 15 alternative coins rise and fall by the nature of Bitcoin. If Bitcoin continues on the path that it appears to be, just because of the interest that these exchanges, public NASDAQ. I mean, once NASDAQ does it, you're going to see it at the New York Stock Exchange probably within 30 days. And once that happens, every major world stock exchange will participate, as well as commodity exchanges, because it's perfectly appropriate on a commodity exchange.
Faisal, are you purchasing or using SafeCoin to host your Bitcoin?
No, not at all.
I don't think anybody but myself on this broadcast have heard of it. But it is an interesting.
But I tell you, I think you will see a lot of cases like when the internet, the .com thing happened, and there was a boom and then a bust. You'll see a lot of companies come up with innovative ideas. Some will be just absurd. Some will be too advanced. Some will just eventually get will get taken over or die down. And remember Alta Vista?
Yeah, pets.com. Web crawler.
Remember Webvan?
Webvan.
Web crawler, Lycos. So we don't know if the current Bitcoin is a Alta Vista, is it a Webvan, is it Lycos? We don't know. We don't know if there's a Google yet to be made in the Bitcoin era.
But Bitcoin is not even CompuServe yet in the internet world. I mean, I don't even think we're at. We're not even at that stage. I mean, we're just a bunch of nerds hanging out of the college university computer room, and I think it's 1987. If you compare it to the internet, we're not at 1994, and Mark Andreessen was probably not even born yet. That's how early, if you want to use the internet algorithm to compare both of these things. So it is so early, and I think Faisal put it so well. The ultimate use cases of Bitcoin have not been thought of.
So Brian, let's move on to the next topic. Vericoin, as we talked before the show, looks like another interesting concept. Do you currently mine Vericoin? The title of the article, and I'll include this in the post for the podcast, the altcoin you can spend wherever Bitcoin's accepted.
Well, let me interview you on this. Reading that, what do you take away from? First off, all Vericoin is already mined. It's now proof of ownership, but reading that, what's your feeling on the premise? You're an entrepreneur, and you're going to be vetting investments as you become exceedingly wealthy in your ventures and become a VC, I'm sure, at some point. What do you see in this article?
It's interesting. I think it certainly, I would say, strives to prove a point that there's effectively going to be many different coins, right? And I think the value of each different coin, almost like crypto, not currencies, but currencies now, each of them have different places in the world, right? And I think Vericoin makes an interesting value proposition that you can, you could spend it, use it wherever Bitcoin, and I think Bitcoin just represents a specific currency, right? It could be anyone, is accepted. Almost, you see it where like Visa, MasterCard, say wherever money's accepted. So I think they're sort of building on top of that parallel in the marketing world of credit cards.
Exactly.
So
they're essentially becoming a processor. They're essentially saying, you don't have to worry about whether a business accepts Bitcoin. In their ultimate iteration, we'll make sure that they get their money somehow, some way.
Which is brilliant, which is absolutely brilliant marketing, by the way. To throw that out there to the world. Even the merchants that are, on the cutting edge are going to look at that and say, well, maybe I'll give this a shot, right? I heard about Bitcoin, and I'll tell you the one thing about San Francisco and the Bay Area generally for merchants is that they're not excited about technology, but they acknowledge that there's a huge presence of people who would use early technology. So they're more fearful out of missing some opportunity that their neighbor is going to get, right? Accept some payment through order ahead or event, whatever it may be. So they'll generally try things out. They're usually for free. So this would be something where I wouldn't be surprised next time I go to SF to see this across different stores.
Yeah, you'll see things like this. And the fact remains that, when we look at the California law that Jerry Brown signed, they specifically mentioned Starbucks stars. And it's important to understand that loyalty programs are the loyalty program is what made Starbucks the most successful wallet in the United States. And that was the driving ambition. And what it essentially is doing, imagine if that was moved into an algorithmic currency type of environment where there's a public ledger. I mean, what we're basically doing when we're rewarding a customer is we're giving them points. And those points ultimately are translated into value in some way, right? We can call it a legal tender value or a value within the store ecosystem. At the end of the day, Starbucks stars represent something of great value to a regular Starbucks customer, and that is more of the product. And imagine if they had a save coin type concept that essentially says that the longer you are a customer of ours, and however they deem that by just by physical presence of buying merchandise and spending time in the store, you start getting an interest payment, if you will. And I'm calling it interest payment because I'm relating to how SaveCoin is working. But imagine if, as a loyal customer over time, you start getting higher and higher dividends. The future of any new product is to not only get somebody interested in the product, but to get them within the company's ecosystem and relationship long term. Advertising in a lot of ways are failing because the noise level is so amazingly loud. For most people, we don't get to hear about new products. You walk into a grocery store, you walk into a pharmacy, every square inch, it was either paid for in a slotting fee. And that's what, surprising. A lot of people don't understand that some products have to pay for that real estate, or it's in fact, it built its way there by massive amount of advertising, coupons in the Sunday paper, et cetera. In fact, if you walk into most stores, let's say at convenience stores, look at the potato chip aisle. That's controlled not by the owner of the store, not by the stock keeper of the store. There's a guy every morning at 4:00 that arranges his truck, drives out and arranges those potato chip bags in such a manner on a shelf that's probably supplied by the manufacturer. That's the ultimate example of slotting fees. And in some cases, if it's in a market that's very competitive, let's say one particular brand against another, let's say Coke, Pepsi, they'll actually not charge you for what's on the floor of your store. You only pay for what is sold, and there's shrinkage fees. A certain percentage will just not even get paid for. So how do we get people's attention? It's through these loyalty programs. And as we go down this space, we're going to be seeing creative uses. So why did Starbucks want to get involved in this? I think we're seeing a precursor of where they might be in the future within the payment system. And I believe that loyalty points are going to become much more powerful in the future. And what we call a coin.
We're going to have to legalize those. Each one of those there's going to be a currency of Starbucks stars.
each one are legalized.
Yeah.
Each one are legalized. But Amazon's already got Amazon Coin. I mean, let's look at that. I mean, and it's doing phenomenally well for them actually. It's not an algorithmic coin. It's not something you can mine. But I won't be surprised if we see an element of that in the future. The mining is the legitimacy of the product.
Do you see Starbucks? I mean, having something like a coffee coin, a coin or a payment system that's good for, the retail level world of coffee. You'll see Dogecoin for, tipping. You'll see a coin for, giving credits. You'll see a web hosting coin, a coin that is accepted universally for web
Absolutely.
hosting. You might even see a coin for freelancers, So if you do freelancing work, this is the coin for you.
It requires an exchange. It just requires an exchange. See, you might exist in that
exchange is fine, so coins based on a particular vertical or a habit,
I love it. And again, let's go back to the history perspective. In the 17 to 1800s, we had over 70,000 different currencies when you add them all together in the United States. Now, did that create chaos? Was it havoc? No.
Yeah, but Brian, give perspective to where it is, right? At that point, there was no communication. There was no one in New York that knew anyone in California or had any desire to exchange money, right? Relatively.
Not necessarily.
Say the fraction of people who would want to exchange currencies is far less than there is now, right? I really want to send money to my brother in Tokyo, but, back then, there's not that desire is so low.
Yeah, if you look at the railroad currencies, and you really make a great point, and it's very deep here, actually. When you look at the railroad currencies, why were the railroads so involved in this? Because they were about mobility, and they were about moving value from one point of the country to the other. And they were, in some ways, competing against the Pony Express and Wells Fargo, because they were moving financial units back and forth also. The act of unifying the currency in the United States really wasn't the 1920s. I mean, that had nothing to do, the failure of the stock market. It had more to do with a political mandate. There was actually an incredible amount of trading and arbitrage. A lot of people made a lot of money by buying, railroad currencies in the Atlantic region and reselling them in the Pacific region. There were people that literally rode on the railroads doing this. Now, originally, the currency started out as a way to pay their employees. And then you would use that railroad currency in company stores, company town, and on the company towns, and also on the train itself. But it became widely traded as merchants said, "Listen, I'll take your railroad currency. I don't need your U.S. dollars." They're really, you got to remember, the United States for many, many years was using the currencies of other nations to trade. So this gets into the minutia of the politics. There's a whole lot of political quagmire one could get into this and philosophy. I won't go down that road.
And I love the fact that you know it, though.
But the common denominator was gold and silver at that point in time.
Now, in a modern aspect, the common denominator could be a Bitcoin type of gold, if you will. That might become the standard. So when people tell me there's just too many coins, it's too confusing, it's like what Faisal said. They're going to be verticals that it will make a tremendous amount of sense. There'll be a lot of ridiculousness. There'll be people like with the Wright brothers jumping off the side of the mountain with flappy bird wings on, hoping to fly. But there will be a couple of bicycle makers that go off on Kitty Hawk and then take to air. Now, who that is going to be, I don't know. Whether it actually is Bitcoin, to me, is an irrelevant concept. But you could say, at least within the next 10 years, if you bought Bitcoin in 2014, it is going to be worth significantly more at a 10-year mark because it's not going away.
I want to amplify on what you said. It's not about Bitcoin, and really it isn't. It's about the fact that we are now living in a world where we can generate money in a new manner, and this monetary value, whatever we create, can be used for various purposes, nefarious included. It can be traded on a platform known as TCP/IP, very easily sent across the world. But it's that notion that you have to understand that this is something that goes into the subdecimals, can be divided, can be pooled up. Multiple people from around the world can participate. You can keep inflation in check. All the things that for the last maybe 500 years, in banking and finance, economics have taught us are essentially being remolded into a new currency, into a new protocol. So it is a very important thought that you must understand, that we have a new thought mechanism, and a lot of people just won't get it. Just won't get it.
There are people today. There are people today that will never physically touch their entertainment. They won't touch a DVD. They won't touch a CD. They don't even. I have children, and I was hanging out with a group of kids at a birthday party, and we were talking about, DVDs, and half the kids never saw a DVD.
Isn't that crazy?
They're 6 years old, 5 years old actually, and they're looking at the parent who was talking about a DVD. And a few of these kids, their parents are quite young, and they don't own DVD players at the house. Yeah. It's all Apple TV. Yeah. It's all virtual.
And their first phone is an iPhone.
That's right. So that's what's going to happen with currencies and banking.
Absolutely. I mean, technology is only the stuff that was invented after you were born, right?
That's
right.
How
we think about it.
Exactly. And it's hard. It's hard for people to deal with.
So we've got about 5 minutes left. I want to run this idea by you. We'll have sort of like a innovative last 5-minute feedback, right? This is one of the listeners of the show reached out to me and invited me to lunch and explained this idea he had, and it's really an interesting concept. So the idea is, and feel free to tear it up, right? He wants completely
is this
unbiased.
Official office hours or around the coin?
Calls, official office. Last 5 minutes, just throw out something crazy,
This is what we should do. On a regular basis, our listeners, if they prompt us, we will do this, and we will not be
let's do
policy about it, but we'll be honest.
I think it's great. Because people, man, I could tell you, Brian, Faisal, there are guys out there who would pay Bitcoin to have feedback on ideas from you guys. So here we go. The idea basically is to exchange the need for cash, or you have a need for cash, right? Say you go to a valet and you tip the guy. You always tip in cash. And Brian is, famously, you say all the time, until you get rid of my license or credit card or other things, you're not going to get rid of my wallet. So people generally carry cash. But the problem is, and there's a couple of different use cases for this, is that there's not an effective parallel to cash, right? And there's a couple different peer-to-peer payment systems. Venmo comes to mind. But Venmo, inherently, you have to have identification for that other person. You have to either have their email or their phone number, right? The beauty in cash is that, you really only need two things. You need to physically know who the person is standing in front of you, and you need to have the cash on you. You don't need to know anything else about that person. You can literally exchange that value. And the pure, not having to know who that person is or have any identification is extremely valuable. So the idea is, could you create a system to where you have a geolocation-based or a location-based service that comes up and it'll anonymously list the people around you. So say this would be experience, right? Brian, you and I meet, say you're my valet guy, since I use that example. You open the app, and assuming you both have it on the phone for now, you both open the app, and it's going to say, in his example, it was brilliant. He said a color, right? So you're green, and I'm blue, and I see around me are maybe 5 colors, and everyone is going to be different. So I select green, and I say, okay, transfer $3 to green, right? Select done, and then as soon as we walk away, you have evidence of the transaction, but you never actually know who that person is. Right, so that's one example. Another interesting one was in group sessions. Say you're in like a church or a conference or some large group where effectively the speaker is on stage trying to get people to deliver value, pay money for some cause, right? He amps people up. Yeah, he wants people to donate, get people super excited. Now what do? They hand a basket down the aisle and say, drop in some dollars or a check, right? What if there was a way where it takes
place in every church?
Yeah.
What if church in the United States?
Every church, every conference. What if there was a way where you could say, okay, donate to the green, right? Or donate to a hashtag, or a cash tag is kind of the premise of it, right? So you have a cash tag, and if it's speaker on stage 12, then everyone donates, they open up their phone, and they could send money right to this person. I think it fills a need where, and I really like the idea, it fills a need where there's just an anonymous transaction from someone around you.
But is it really anonymous? It's synonymous, really, in a sense, because there's a mediator party. There's somebody going to be in the middle, right? And that middle party will have to at least know person A and person B to some extent.
How so?
So it's anonymous to the sender, and it's anonymous to the receiver, but the middle party knows both both entities.
Well, you don't, as an
work.
experience from a user, if Faisal was right in front of me and I wanted to give him money, I don't know who he is, but he just convinced me that this is, he just read my palm, for instance. I could just give him cash effectively through this application.
Well,
I don't need to know his
Faisal
identity.
reads my palm, I'm Visa and sometimes American Express, but he's a great futurist. All right, no, listen, it's a brilliant idea, but there's some problems.
I'll tell you, cash is still quicker, way quicker.
Yeah.
What would be even quicker, equally, it's number two would be some sort of a card. You like a calculator, very small calculator. You type number 5 on it. That means $5, and you NFC.
Yeah,
money transfer.
This is exactly what I was going to say.
Contactless payment.
Yeah, Apple is coming out with a.
I don't need to look at my phone and look at the green color and the blue
first,
color.
let me ask you.
I don't mean.
Let's put aside the peer-to-peer, because I think that in my mind the group aspect is more interesting, right?
Yeah, I love the
anytime
group
there's real friction, people really want to give money, but they cannot do it without.
I've actually had a lot of experience in this. I've worked with a lot of nonprofits over the last 30 years, and one of the quagmires they've had is there is a fear of, let's just call it an insecurity that they're not giving enough. Part of the things that a lot of churches will do and faith-based organizations is that they'll have a cover that closes the basket up so that the person who's donating doesn't have to feel like they're being judged, that they can't afford to give so much. These organizations don't care if you give $1 or $5. The problem is people are carrying less and less cash, and they may not be able to give what they normally would want. One of the ways I solved that problem for a lot of faith organizations was to make subscriptions take off. And this is almost a decade and a half. It was very cutting edge. And we had, the Mormon Church was one of the.
But Brian,
entities.
those subscriptions were completely different from this concept,
it's a radical
right?
different concept. So now let's look at this concept. First, I think Faisal's right on. I think that the idea is great, but we're approaching it from an engineering standpoint, not the way people feel, right? So we really want to be able to touch off, and I think this idea, and it's one of the reasons why NFC will never go away, is because it does solve a problem. And this is what a lot of technologists, the anti-NFC people, are usually the same anti-Bitcoin people, unfortunately. So
in this example, you really don't need NFC, right?
Well, you do and you don't. Okay, so let's look at.
The British government, which operates the London Transport, did the same thing. The only solution they found viable world over, including Hong Kong, etc., Singapore, to the coins and the notes that you were putting in for your metro, for your taxi, was NFC. I mean, there is no other alternate. Find Uber and all those apps, etc. But the fastest thing you can whip out from your wallet is an NFC card, clamp it, and you've paid.
Well, it doesn't even have to be a card.
So I don't see why the problem is.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be a card.
But I guess Faisal.
Whatever, but.
Go ahead, Faisal.
Yeah, go ahead.
Faisal, my only point there was,
I'm saying, your valet guy could just have his phone, and I could tap my card, and I paid him $5 or $3, whatever I type in.
That works there, but let's look at that. Let's look at a solution where you want to donate. You have a group of people in the audience and say, "Send me money." Right now, let's back off from the premise for a second and say, do the people who want to send the money at that point want to be anonymous? Because I could see the valet, I could see the guy doing my shoes, or I can even see a homeless. I could see all sorts of ways to tip. And by the way, there's a little maybe relatively unknown startup called Klinkle that has this basic premise, and they want to be at least one of the iterations. I think we're on iteration 37, 38, I don't know. But one of the iterations was to be able to send money anonymously to people around you, and they were going to primarily use Sonics as the medium of exchange.
So we only got about 2 minutes left here. I'm going to ask, if there was a group environment where you could pay by using the geolocation of the phone, so you say you're qualified to pay, there's a cash tag, you submit. It seems like we're getting to the point where there's a need, It seems like the technology's there. I don't see why you'd particularly
There's no doubt of need. There's
NFC.
no doubt.
So, you're in an environment where, say you're going skiing, right? And there's like 15 people together. You all want to pay to contribute to buy some package, right? I think there's a lot of group aggregate payments. Maybe that's a limited use case. Maybe that's as far as the idea goes.
How
But
about
hey,
just entering a building?
yeah, and let me ask you this one, Brian. As a guy who's been around merchant processing for a while, the inevitable problem when 10 people go out to eat, right? Like, how does the payments happen? The payments are like combination of cash and card. It's always terrible.
It's crazy,
right? Yeah. So what if you had one cash tag? Everyone just opened up their phone, they paid the one guy, and then he submitted money. Or the restaurant, even better yet, opened up a cash tag. Everyone submits money to that, and then you get to your grand total for the thing. So I think there's a lot of applications. Final question, though.
Yeah, that case makes sense to me.
Yeah, Faisal. Yeah. Faisal, let me ask you first. Yes or no question. There's no maybes. Faisal, would you invest? You're sitting across the table, and you have to write $1 million check on a $6 million valuation. Are you going to write it?
No, you asked me yes. You asked me yes or no.
No, Brian.
Well, if you're gonna, I don't know enough about it. I would massage the concept, so I would have to say no until I sat down with somebody. But I could say this: encouraging. The premise is very valid. You have to really massage this down to reality. You have to pick your use case and focus it like a laser. And you already found one of the use cases. Let's not worry about tipping of the butler or anything like that. Let's look at solving the problem of groups wanting to give money, but also expand it to the notion that if I walk into the door of a particular club, the moment I go through a threshold that I paid money, that's because the same concept can work from a business.
So it has potential. We'll say that. We'll leave it there. I don't like
peer-to-peer as much as trying to sell it to a business, because that's where the chicken or egg problem is solved.
Right.
If you can convince a business owner to say the moment X person walks through the door, they're now accessing the business. Otherwise, they're paying a cover charge. Is really what we're talking about. There's an opportunity.
All right, we'll call it there. So we'll call it there's an opportunity. First office hours success. We'll get maybe we'll do yes, no, maybe. So we got one no, one maybe.
Actually bring entrepreneurs in next time, and we'll grill them hardcore like on TechCrunch. No, we won't do that.
All right, guys, this has been a great one.
Have a great weekend, guys.
Thank you very much.
Take care.
Have a good one.
Bye-bye.
Bye.